I'm going to share a little bit of a personal experience and hope that I answer it in this way. We all chose families that have some sort of intergenerational trauma, some unhealed wounding, some pattern behaviors. Not only did we choose a family to incarnate that has that, but we also chose a country that has its own, a society, a culture, a state that has these patterns of unhealed wounding. And the one I chose to come into has diagnosed sociopathy, has alcohol addiction, has patriarchy, has cruelty at the highest level, has abuse, manipulation at a high level. And I wouldn't have been able to do this work and to observe myself if I had remained embedded in that energy, right? I had to separate, create separateness in order to come back to self. And when I encounter other individuals that express or manifest that same pattern of energy in similar ways that I recognize that are familiar for me, that I find myself either, if I'm in a more conscious place, I will create resistance and space between myself and that other individual. If I'm feeling my nervous system is activated, triggered, on edge, then I am more likely to respond from a subconscious place. And that subconscious place is judgment. So the higher frequency of this is discernment of, this feels familiar. Let me drop in and understand why. Oh, I'm recognizing a pattern from that feels familiar and familial. And I recognize this as a pattern associated with sociopathy, right? And so in discernment, I recognize that's not for me and I can move away from it. If I'm in a low vibrational place, then I judge it, I act subconsciously, and I project and I respond, I react. And instead of going inward to question the experience, I automatically say, this is about this person's wrong, this person's that. I start placing judgments, labels, and boxes, right? And when I really tune in and drop into myself, the reason I recognize that energy and why it's so triggering to me is because that energy, even that of sociopathy, because it's in the DNA of the family, it's in the environment, it's a cult, it's a pattern, it's a culture that's a part of the family I incarnated into. There's an element of it in me. So it's almost like an anti-venom, right? We get bit by a snake, they put venom in us to counteract the venom as an anti-venom, right? So there's a frequency of that in me that allows me to recognize it in another. I just choose not to manifest it or respond from it because I've done enough inner work. And I remember my childhood coming to a fork in the road where I could behave in this way and exercise behaviors associated with the pattern of sociopathy or narcissism. And I remember recognizing the pattern and saying, that's not who I want to be. And I made a choice. And I believe that all of us have had that crossroads of operating from a shadow wounding or frequency that exists in our familial line. And some of us respond subconsciously and some of us respond consciously. And this is what it means to deprogram and to interrupt the pattern. And I believe more of us are pattern interrupts than not. We came here with the desire to break familial patterns. So this being said, when I'm triggered by somebody, instead of saying this person's a jerk, this person's manipulative, you're controlling. If I'm around an individual, because controlling is a huge programming for me, when I'm around an individual who's controlling, I'm super resistant and reactive, and I instantaneously don't like you. But then I'm like, ooh, let's sit with this. And I'm like, I'm actually being controlling. Because I feel they're being controlling, I'm reacting with controlling because I think if I can control, if I can top over, if I can dominate, then you can't dominate me. But if I actually recognize you could never dominate me, what are you going to do? You can never have control over me because I have all this, I have true sovereignty. You have nothing. And once I reassure myself, they have no power.
So that's my question there, is that part, right? And I like that you said, what's the advice? Because I guess, you know what, the more I listen is my controlling nature comes up that wants to save everybody from having to go into it. Right. But there is also an element of some people just have to learn it boots on the ground.
So some of us are raised in environments where we feel we have to save or protect a family member. So now we become a martyr and we become a savior. And that is a part of a programming that kept us safe in childhood. But we have to let go of it because now it just went from saving and protecting those who were more vulnerable
to trying to control
now controlling and dominating because we're trying to save them from themselves. And we all came here with the desire to have different experiences. And you may think you're saving, but you're actually keeping them from their purpose, their dharma, and why they incarnated and why they're here. And then that desire to save and protect becomes control and domination. See how easily it shifts?
It's, you just got to sometimes just get the popcorn and watch the sparks fly with some people and in some situations.
And just hold them and hug them when they come to you, and then ask them, reflect back their experience. What could you have done different? What did you learn about yourself? I like it. And as you talk to yourself and you work on that energy that's resonating within you, and you start to sit in it and you start to feel it and you start to process it and you start to recognize it and you start to see the pattern for what it is, you change your attraction, how you attract to others and who you attract to yourself, because you're no longer on that frequency. You're no longer there. So now all of a sudden you got a whole new group of people that you're bringing in, and through discernment, which is a byproduct of knowing your values. I call them your internal systems. And I work with a lot of my clients to understand and learn your values, not replicate the values of the society or families that you were born into, but actually learn your true values by questioning everything you know. And I have a workbook. At some point, I'll be making it public and make it free to individuals, but it's a really in-depth workbook to help you learn your values. And from your values, you then create standards. So not to get confused with, expectations are a byproduct of when we don't know our values. But when we do know our values, we create standards. And so then we hold our standards quite high. And then we have boundaries that allow us to stay in resonance with our own standards and values. And so that is all coming home to self. And the more you sit in that, the more you change who is attracted to you and who you're attracted to.